Next up, Cisco is going to be here securing the public trust through better detection. Steve
Caimi.
Caimi, there we go, thank you, is a cybersecurity specialist at Cisco and is laser focused on securing public sector departments and agencies. His career spans 20 years of diverse experience in information security, computer networking, and telecommunications. Steve's SEP highlights the key tenets of effective cyber threat detection. Please, warm welcome of applause for Cisco.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I realize I'll also running a little bit short on time, so I'll try to keep my words very carefully chosen here. I'm sure all of you are seeing in the news the reports that there's been potential hacking into voter registration databases, and you think about that from a citizen perspective. What do they think, right, about state government when they hear, stories like this? So I think there's a lot of things that we can do, obviously, and you've heard a lot of that today in terms of securing the public trust. But I think one of the things we'd like to focus on here today is doing a little bit better job of detection. Right? So this might be a little bit difficult picture to see, and you might have even actually seen it before. But I think we all know that in the cyber world, the threats aren't so easy to see, right? The holes that that we see. So what you're actually looking at here is is a little gate with people clearly driving around it, right? If only the cyber world was so simple, right? So if any of you were here last year, you might have seen my presentation where I highlighted the NIST Cyber Security Framework, right? We've heard a little bit about this earlier today. I think UC might have mentioned it. And clearly, these 5 concurrent functions are things that we need to be thinking about across the board, right? From a cybersecurity perspective, we have to be able to identify not only the threats and things that are focused on us, but we also need to understand what assets we have in order to put the right protections in place, which then in turn leads to our detection, respond, and recover. Right? So NIST puts that together to be able to put a framework around managing cybersecurity risks and doing it in a cost-effective way. In this session here, we'll focus specifically on the detect function, and at 10:15, right on the other side of this wall, we'll highlight this session in the context of real-world examples and actually taking a closer look at the NIST cybersecurity framework. And again, visibility is the key, right? There's all these threats out there from suspicious traffic patterns, right? If you have a database of, voter information, all of a sudden it starts communicating with a system it never did before. How do you spot these kinds of things, right? We have encrypted traffic. How do we understand what the threats are associated with traffic that's already encrypted? We don't have the capabilities to decrypt everything and so forth. So effective threat detection is rooted in visibility, right? Having the visibility into what's actually occurring. And one of the ways that we can approach it is through an integrated threat defense strategy. So again, we mentioned the NIST cybersecurity framework, and there's 3 key areas that they point out in terms of best practices around the detect function, right? One of them is about spotting anomalies in events, right? Being able to actually identify what those threats are. Secondly, we already heard about continuous monitoring. NIST has a whole publication on information security continuous monitoring, NIST 800-137, if I remember correctly. And then finally, having the right people and process controls in place to be able to detect. Obviously, the point, and we heard about this already, is that coordination, right, among people, process, and technology is really the key. But obviously, that's easier said than done, right? So we have to be able to find a better way to do it. So what I thought I'd share with you is obviously really effective security is rooted in 3 key areas. First is about simplicity. We've already heard today how few cybersecurity professionals we have. There's a lot of technologies out there you can see on the floor that can look complex. But wouldn't it be fantastic if the security technologies were able to suggest things by looking at the network traffic and saying, hey, why don't we put these rules in place? Or here's potentially suspicious traffic that we've never seen before, right? That has to be simple, and the results of these things have to be actionable, right, for human beings to take action on. Secondly, it has to be open, not only relying on things like open standards, but actually open application programming interfaces to drive that integration, which brings me to the third point about automation, right? We probably think about automating our security response activities and so forth, but we actually have we have to be able to trust it, right? We human beings can't react fast enough in today's threat landscape in order to properly defend. So again, I'll highlight some of these in my session next door at 10:15, but the 6 tenets of an integrated threat defense strategy builds on these ideas, right? So I have a slide on each of these. I won't go through them in a ton of detail. Again, I'll go through them in the context in our next session about how it aligns with the framework and actually these real-world examples that I mentioned. But one of the tenets, if you follow it, is the benefit you'll receive is having, taking a richer network and security architecture approach, it actually gives us that visibility, right? What if the network itself was able to give us threat information? What if we were able to take that and leverage that in our defense and detection, strategy? Secondly, what if we're able to do more with less, right? The strategy relies on not necessarily best of breed or all, more and more in technology. We have a tendency, I think, in this industry to see a problem and then try to buy a box to solve the problem, when I think we need to be able to get more out of the technologies and make them work better together. A third aspect, like I mentioned, is actually offering that visibility into malicious traffic. We can't possibly encrypt or decrypt all of the encrypted traffic. I mean, heck, even Google searches these days are being encrypted, right? How much encryption network traffic? So wouldn't it be fantastic, too, again, if we had that visibility without actually having to take into the burden of looking into all the actual session traffic? If you think of a simple example of just looking at, phone records, you could identify from a set of phone records some, potentially suspicious traffic, and there's a clear analog, right, to that in the networking world. A fourth aspect, like I mentioned, is leveraging solutions that integrate, right? Multi-platform, multi-vendor solutions are here to stay, right? So we have to be able to leverage these open APIs and actually put them together in a way that effectively does more with less. So the fifth aspect is about requiring less gear, like I mentioned. Let's make sure that we have the security capabilities built into our architectures themselves, and we have a lot of ways that we can accomplish that. And then finally, we have to be able to reduce that time to detection through that automation approach. Again, I think a lot of us are hesitant to let technology make changes or update firewall rules or things like that because, we don't know what change can happen, or we don't think, potentially we could have an operational problem that could occur. But I think in today's world, we have to be able to trust this automation and put it in place and make it work. So again, the NIST cybersecurity framework, and you heard in the previous session when Gartner was talking about bringing risk down to an acceptable level, one of the things that I've done a lot of is brought the NIST cybersecurity framework to a lot of state and local governments and had been advocating that as a way to take and manage cybersecurity risks and plug it in, right? And this is in the context of identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. We have a lot more information. Certainly all these slides will be available. Like I said, my sessions at 10:15 will highlight 5 specific real-world examples, including ransomware. And of course, obviously take a look at the Computer Security Resource Center, right? Not only is there this risk management framework, cybersecurity framework out there, but there's obviously a ton of guidance around mobile and cloud and so forth, computing. And I couldn't resist with only a month to go to Halloween. Happy Halloween from all of us from Cisco. And again, I hope you'll join me in the session in 309. Thank you.
Wow. Boy, that helped a lot. You may actually get a lot of people in your class at 10:15 now. Thank you. Once again, Steve Caimi. Thank you.